Welcome to Sleep History. Tonight, we journey back to the Hongwu era of the Ming Dynasty. The night air settles over the curved roofs of Yingshan City, painting the grand palaces in a soft, mysterious haze. The gentle wind rattles the window frames, making the candle shadows dance across the walls. Relax your mind, sink into the comfort of the dark, and listen to the faint crackle of the flame. Let us step back into the pages of the past, and witness a terrifying game of power and survival. After the brilliant strategist Liu Ji passed away, Chancellor Hu Weiyong felt like he was standing on top of the world. He stepped over the political corpses of the Zedong faction, and firmly planted the dominant flag of his own Huexi faction. The grand official seal of the Secretariat was practically his personal toy. Every morning, when the civil and military officials gathered at the royal court, their eyes would first dart to Hu Weiyong, checking his mood before they dared to speak. Every single government document, every report from the provinces, had to pass through his private study before it ever reached the emperor. If a report contained even a hint of criticism against him, it either mysteriously vanished on the road, or was rewritten so heavily that its original meaning was completely destroyed. Hu Weiyong held the absolute power of the 6 ministries in the palm of his hand. His loyal followers and corrupt students were scattered across every corner of the empire. Even the eunuchs serving deep inside the imperial palace happily took his heavy bribes and became his hidden eyes and ears. But behind this endless, blinding glory, hid a cold truth that he never understood until his dying breath. His massive political victory was never truly earned by his own genius. Years ago, when he fought a bitter political war against Liu Ji, it looked like the military men of the Huexi faction were simply crushing the scholars of the Zedong faction. But in reality, every single step of that war had the silent, calculating permission of the Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang. Zhu Yuanzhang knew these two groups better than they knew themselves. The Huexi men were the old brothers who fought through fire and blood alongside him to conquer the world. Their roots were deep, but they were mostly rough military men, uneducated warriors who were nowhere near as good at playing political chess as the refined scholars of the Zedong faction. On the other hand, the Zedong men had brilliant, world-class minds like Liu Ji, but they were outsiders, men from the south with no real foundation in the capital city. By letting these two massive forces fight each other, Zhu Yuanzhang was simply sitting on the mountain, watching the tigers tear each other apart. He let them weaken each other, so he could effortlessly gather the ultimate power back into his own hands. Hu Weiyong, completely blinded by his own ego, took this terrifying imperial balancing act as a sign of his own political mastery. He forgot that in his early years, he was nothing more than a minor, insignificant county magistrate in Ningbo. If Zhu Yuanzhang had not seen him as a weak, easily controlled tool, he would never have even touched the stone steps of the Secretariat. Liu Ji had the legendary fame of a mastermind who helped unite the rivers and mountains. But Hu Weiyong had no great founding merits, and no brilliant military victories. His only real skills were kissing up to his superiors, flattering the right people, and forming corrupt alliances in the shadows. But power is a dangerous drug, and it has a way of completely destroying a man's mind. Once Hu Weiyong held the ultimate authority, he practically forgot his own name. In the 6th year of the Hongwu reign, after the official Wang Guanjiang was pushed out of the way, Hu Weiyong took total, uncontested control as the sole chancellor of the Ming Dynasty. For the next 7 years, his behavior was so outrageous, he practically carved the words lawless and arrogant right onto his own forehead. Taking massive bribes was just his daily routine. If an official did not bring him heavy, expensive gifts, they would be endlessly harassed, or brutally stripped of their rank. The private mansion he built for himself was the size of a royal prince's palace. The massive wooden pillars he used were secretly stolen from the exclusive imperial lumber yards. The floor tiles he walked on were solid gold bricks sent as royal tribute from the wealthy southern provinces. Even the beautiful artificial mountains in his private garden were made of incredibly rare Taiyu stones, shipped all the way from Suzhou at massive expense. But what was even more dangerous was that he dared to promote and demote high-ranking officials on his own authority, bypassing the emperor entirely. The Marquis of Jian, Lu Zoneng, once offended Zhu Yuanzhang over a minor issue, and was harshly scolded by the emperor. Hu Weiyong saw the perfect opportunity. He secretly sent the Marquis 100 taels of pure gold, and 2 stunningly beautiful women. He held Lu Zoneng's hand, smiled warmly, and said, "My lord, you do not need to worry about a thing. As long as I am standing near His Majesty, I will smooth everything out for you." With just that one simple promise, the powerful Marquis Lu Zoneng became his loyal, unquestioning dog. Then there was the censor-in-chief, Chen Ning. Chen Ning used to be a strict, honorable, and unbending official. But Hu Weiyong found out that Chen Ning had a frail elderly mother living far away, so Hu secretly sent his men to bring the old woman to Nanjing. He put her up in a luxurious mansion, fed her the rarest delicacies from the mountains and seas every single day, and even visited her personally. He held her hands and called her auntie, sounding sweeter and more devoted than her own flesh and blood son. Chen Ning was moved to tears by this extreme kindness. From that day forward, he followed Hu Weiyong's every command without a second thought. He even helped Hu Weiyong frame innocent, loyal men, making up false criminal charges to destroy Hu's political enemies. The people of the capital started calling him Chen the Iron, because he loved using red-hot branding irons to force fake confessions out of innocent prisoners. Beyond these high-ranking heavyweights, Hu Weiyong pulled in an army of middle and lower-level officials. His methods of corruption were endless and perfectly tailored. For the greedy ones he gave chests of gold, silver and jewels. For the lustful ones he sent beautiful women and entertainers. For the ambitious ones, he promised rapid promotions and bigger titles. And for those with dark, hidden secrets, he used ruthless blackmail. The vice minister of rights, Zhang Heng, once got heavily drunk at a banquet and cursed Hu Weiyong's name. When Hu Weiyong found out, he did not fly into a rage. Instead he quietly invited Zhang Heng to his home, sat him down, and calmly repeated every single drunken insult word for perfect word. Zhang Heng was scared out of his mind, his soul practically leaving his body. From that terrifying day on he was dead set on serving Hu Weiyong, becoming his personal, obedient mouthpiece in the court. Almost the entire government bureaucracy, from top to bottom, belonged to Hu Weiyong. Even the supreme commander of the Imperial Guards, Mao Xiang, the man trusted with the emperor's life, was bought with heavy gold. Every single day, Mao Xiang would secretly report Zhu Yuanzhang's movements, his daily meals, and even his casual, private conversations, straight to Hu Weiyong. Once, Zhu Yuanzhang was eating dinner and casually mentioned to the heir that the palace food was a bit too greasy lately. The very next day, Hu Weiyong sent his own people to the imperial kitchen, delivering light, fresh ingredients, and giving the royal chef specific instructions on how to cook them. When Zhu Yuanzhang ate the new meal, he found it perfectly suited to his taste and casually praised the chefs. When Hu Weiyong heard about this, he laughed and bragged to his inner circle, saying, "I know the emperor's mind like the back of my hand, who says this entire world cannot be mine." But he was a fool. He never realized that Zhu Yuanzhang saw every single one of these dirty little tricks, clear as day. Who was Zhu Yuanzhang? He was a man who clawed his way up from the absolute bottom of hell. He went from a starving coward, to a begging monk at Hongwu temple, to the fierce leader of a rebel army, and finally, he carved his way to the supreme throne. He had seen every kind of bloody betrayal, every kind of dark conspiracy, and every kind of human evil. Hu Weiyong's little political games looked like children playing in the mud to him. The only reason Zhu Yuanzhang did not strike immediately was because he was a master of patience. He was waiting for the perfect, undeniable moment. A moment that would give him the absolute, moral high ground, not just to kill a man but to completely abolish the chancellor system forever. Hu Weiyong was arrogant, but deep down in his bones he was also terrified. He knew Zhu Yuanzhang was a sleeping dragon, and not a man to provoke. As his own power grew larger and larger, his deep, creeping fear of the emperor grew right along with it. He knew Zhu Yuanzhang would come for his head sooner or later. Rather than sitting around waiting for the executioner's blade, he decided he had to strike first. But he did not dare to just raise an army and march on the palace. He thought about it long and hard and decided the safest, most brilliant plan was to drag everyone else down into the muddy water with him. If the vast majority of the court, and the greatest heroes of the empire, were all tied to his sinking ship, the emperor would have to think twice about shaking the very foundation of the Ming Dynasty. But ordinary officials were not enough to scare the emperor. He needed a true heavyweight. He needed the Duke of Han, Li Shanchang. Li Shanchang was the ultimate founding father of the empire, a man with world-shaking prestige, and the proud owner of 2 iron plaques, given by the emperor himself, that guaranteed absolute immunity from the death penalty. If Li Shanchang stood by his side, even Zhu Yuanzhang would have to hesitate before pulling his sword. Hu Weiyong packed a fortune and personally visited Li Shanchang's massive estate. He brought 1,000 taels of pure gold, priceless jade ornaments, and a magnificent, rare horse that could run 1,000 miles a day. Li Shanchang was an old, brilliant fox. He had followed Zhu Yuanzhang through decades of brutal warfare. He had seen with his own eyes exactly how the emperor treated generals whose merits threatened the throne. The moment he saw the lavish gifts, he knew exactly what dark path Hu Weiyong was walking down. He immediately blocked the gifts at the door, and said with a smooth, untouchable tone, "Chancellor Hu, you and I are both heavy pillars of the royal court. You really should take these personal items back where they came from." Hu Weiyong refused to give up. He leaned in close and whispered, "Duke Li, you have merits that cover the earth. It is an absolute tragedy that you are sitting here idle at home. I am more than willing to recommend you to His Majesty, so you can come out of retirement and help govern this vast world once again." Li Shanqing waved his hand dismissively, and said, "I am old and useless now, my mind is slow, I just want to spend my final years in peace. Please do not trouble yourself on my account, Chancellor." Hitting a solid brick wall, Hu Weiyong still did not back down. He changed his angle. He knew Li Shanqing had a younger brother, Li Kunyi, who worked as an official. And Li Kunyi just happened to be related to Hu Weiyong by the marriage of their children. Hu went straight to Li Kunyi, handed him the deeds to a massive, luxurious courtyard mansion, and dropped 10,000 taels of silver at his feet. He looked at Li Kunyi and said, "Father-in-law, the court looks peaceful on the surface, but the dark currents are raging underneath. I know the immense power of Duke Li. If I have his support, my seat as Chancellor is untouchable, and in the future, if a grand opportunity arises, I promise you, I will never forget the benefits for you and the great Duke." Li Kunyi was a weak, greedy man by nature. Once the heavy silver was in his hands, his loyalty was bought. He immediately ran to his older brother's house, and tried to convince the Duke to join the conspiracy. When Li Shanqing heard the treasonous words coming out of his brother's mouth, his face turned pale with shock and terror. He pointed a trembling finger at Li Kunyi, and yelled, "You absolute fool, Hu Weiyong is wildly ambitious and completely reckless. He will bring a storm of disaster upon his own head. How can you mix yourself up in his madness? Return those things immediately, and I forbid you from ever speaking to him again." But Li Kunyi did not listen to the warning. He kept coming back, day after day, whispering sweet poison into his brother's ear. One day he would talk about how massive and unstoppable Hu Weiyong's forces had become. The next day he would talk about how Zhu Yuanzhang was hopelessly paranoid, slaughtering the old heroes one by one. Then he would promise that sticking with Hu Weiyong was the only guaranteed way to keep the Li family rich, powerful and alive for generations. Li Shanqing was retired, but his eyes were still sharp to the politics of the capital. He knew Zhu Yuanzhang's suspicion was a bottomless pit. Most of the old comrades who fought to build the empire had already been disposed of on fabricated charges. He had his iron plaques of immunity, but deep down in his heart, he felt no real safety. The emperor gave the plaques, and the emperor could take them away with a single, bloody word. He also knew that Hu Weiyong was the current leader of the Huexi faction. If Hu Weiyong was dragged down to the execution block, the entire Huexi group would be completely annihilated. And he, as the old, original boss of that faction, would likely die a terrible, painful death alongside them. Slowly, agonizingly under the constant, heavy pressure from his greedy brother, his firm attitude began to soften. One day when Li Kunyi came to push him yet again, Li Shanqing let out a long, exhausted sigh, and said a deeply profound, fatal sentence. He looked away and said, "I am already old, I do not have many years left to live in this world. After I am dead, you all just do whatever you see fit." This sentence looked like a tired, silent agreement, but it was actually his clever way of washing his hands of the treason. He did not want to offend the dangerous Hu Weiyong, but he also did not want Zhu Yuanzhang to catch him actively plotting. He wanted to float in the middle. But he never imagined, in his wildest nightmares, that this exact sentence would eventually become the ultimate, undeniable proof of his treason. When Li Kunyi brought this message back, Hu Weiyong was ecstatic, practically jumping with joy. He felt like he had a golden shield, and no more worries in the world. He began to expand his dark power with absolute, unchecked madness. He secretly forged weapons and armor, hiding them in the dark corners of the city. He recruited desperate criminals, murderers and fugitives, hiding them right inside the walls of his own mansion. He even sent secret messengers across the borders, trying to contact the remnants of the northern Yuan dynasty, hoping they would launch a massive attack from the outside, while he struck the palace from the inside. But every single foolish thing he did was reported directly to Zhu Yuanzhang, by the hidden spies planted all around him. Zhu Yuanzhang read the reports and just smiled a cold, terrifying smile. He wanted Hu Weiyong to go all the way to the edge of the cliff, to make his treason so huge and undeniable, that the emperor would have the absolute right to slaughter everyone involved. In the 13th year of Hongwu, a seemingly random, tragic little incident finally lit the fuse of the great Hu Weiyong case. That day, Hu Weiyong's son, Hu Zun, was riding a wild, fierce horse, galloping like a madman through the crowded, narrow streets of Nanjing. Hu Zun was spoiled rotten since birth, his personality arrogant, cruel, and completely out of control. He always charged through the city like he owned it, and no one ever dared to stop him. But on that specific day, as he rode through a tight alleyway, the horse suddenly spooked and reared up. Hu Zun lost his grip, was violently thrown from the saddle, and landed directly under the heavy, rolling wheels of a passing carriage. His body was crushed, and he stopped breathing right there in the dirt. When Hu Weiyong heard the news, his vision went black, and he passed out cold. When he finally woke up, his overwhelming grief instantly turned into a blind, murderous rage. He ordered his armed guards to immediately hunt down and grab the carriage driver. This driver was just an honest, hard-working peasant, who happened to be driving down the wrong street at the wrong time. He never expected such a horrifying nightmare to fall on his head. Hu Weiyong refused to hear a single word of explanation or mercy. He did not notify the Ministry of Justice, and he did not hold a trial. He simply ordered his guards to drag the terrified peasant out to the front gate of the mansion, and beat him to a bloody pulp with heavy wooden clubs until he was dead. The news of this brutal, lawless street murder spread through the alleys of Nanjing like wildfire, and naturally, it reached the ears of Zhu Yuanzhang. The emperor was sitting quietly in his study, reading official reports. When he heard the news of the murder, he slowly placed his red ink pen down on the desk. He sat in total, heavy silence for a very long time. The eunuch standing next to him, trembling slightly, asked in a careful voice, "Your Majesty, should we send someone to ask Chancellor Hu about this matter?" Zhu Yuanzhang did not look at him. He just said in a flat, chilling tone, "Issue a decree, tell Hu Weiyong to come to the palace and see me." When Hu Weiyong received the imperial order, a cold sweat broke out on his back, and his heart started to hammer. He knew perfectly well that executing a man privately without a trial was a severe violation of Ming Dynasty law. But his ego convinced him he could talk his way out of it. He figured the emperor would not make a huge deal, or risk a political crisis over the worthless life of one dirty peasant. On the way to the palace, he practiced his tears, planning to put on a show of a heartbroken father. He planned to blame the driver entirely, claiming the peasant intentionally spooked the horse to murder the boy out of spite. But when he walked into the grand hall and looked up at Zhu Yuanzhang, the words died in his throat. He saw a face that was terrifyingly calm, without a single ripple of human emotion. Hu Weiyong threw himself to the stone floor and wailed loudly, "Your Majesty, my poor son met a tragic, horrible end. That carriage driver deserved to die 1,000 times. He purposely startled the horse and murdered my boy in cold blood. I was so overcome with a father's grief that I acted without thinking. Please, I beg your Majesty to forgive my sins." Zhu Yuanzhang did not say a word. He just sat on his throne, staring down at him. His eyes were like solid ice, sharp as two steel blades, piercing straight through Hu Weiyong's soul, making his skin crawl. Hu Weiyong felt a deep, freezing chill creep up his spine. The more he talked, the more he panicked. His voice started to shake uncontrollably, breaking into pathetic stutters. He tried to look up just a fraction to read the emperor's face, but the sheer, suffocating terror in Zhu's eyes forced his head right back down to the floor. The great hall was dead silent. The only sounds in the massive room were Hu Weiyong's pathetic sobbing and the slow, heavy, measured breathing of the emperor. After what felt like an eternity of torture, Zhu Yuanzhang slowly stood up. He walked down the steps, stood right in front of the trembling chancellor, and spoke in a voice that was not loud, but echoed like thunder in the silent hall. He said 4 simple words. "A life for a life." Those 4 words struck Hu Weiyong's ears like a lightning bolt from heaven. His entire body went completely soft, all the strength leaving his bones. He slumped against the cold stone floor, his face turning the color of dead ashes. He knew, in that exact second, that Zhu Yuanzhang was finally drawing his sword, and he intended to use it. He wanted to beg for mercy, to scream for his life, but his throat felt like it was stuffed with dry sand. He could not force a single syllable out of his mouth. Zhu Yuanzhang finished speaking, turned his back, and walked away, never looking at him again. When Hu Weiyong was finally dragged out of the palace gates by 2 strong eunuchs, his legs were shaking so violently he could not stand on his own. He rushed back to his mansion in a blind panic, and immediately called his inner circle for a desperate, midnight meeting. The room was full of chaos. Someone shouted, "Chancellor, things have reached the point of no return. We have no choice left but to raise the banners and rebel tonight." Another man whispered nervously, "Maybe the emperor is just angry for the moment. Let us write a memorial begging for extreme punishment. Send more heavy gold to the palace. Maybe His Majesty will let us live." Hu Weiyong paced the room, completely torn and sweating heavily. He knew a military rebellion against Zhu Yuanzhang had almost 0 chance of winning. But waiting around doing nothing meant a guaranteed, gruesome execution. Right while he was paralyzed by fear and indecision, another political disaster struck. In October of the 12th year of Hongwu, the kingdom of Champa sent foreign envoys, bringing exotic tributes to Nanjing to honor the emperor. But Hu Weiyong, still thinking he was above the rules, decided this was too minor of an issue to bother the emperor with. He secretly met the foreign envoys himself, accepted the tribute gifts, and sent them away, without ever sending a single report to the throne. An imperial censor, whose exact job was to monitor the behavior of the officials, found out about this massive breach of protocol. The censor immediately submitted an urgent, damning report to Zhu Yuanzhang. When the emperor read it, he exploded in a calculated fury. He was not mad about the tribute items, he was furious because Hu Weiyong, by receiving foreign diplomats privately, was treating the emperor like he did not even exist. He summoned Hu Weiyong and the left censor-in-chief, Wang Guanjiang, and screamed at them with terrifying, earth-shaking rage. Wang Guanjiang actually hated Hu Weiyong, but he was a notoriously cowardly man. He was too terrified to point the finger directly at Hu, so he desperately pushed the blame onto the Ministry of Rights, claiming they failed to process the paperwork. Hu Weiyong immediately jumped on this weak excuse, agreeing loudly that it was just a bureaucratic mistake by the ministry, and he had nothing to do with it. Zhu Yuanzhang saw right through their pathetic, trembling lies. He did not even bother investigating the Ministry of Rights. Instead, he simply ordered his royal guards to drag Wang Guanjiang straight into the darkest imperial dungeon. Sitting in the cold, damp cell, Wang Guanjiang was completely confused. He thought he was just a minor scapegoat in a bigger game, so he wrote a long, pleading letter defending his innocence. But Zhu Yuanzhang did not even read it. He simply issued a cold decree ordering Wang Guanjiang to commit suicide. Before Wang Guanjiang drank the poison, he looked at the stone walls, let out a long bitter sigh, and whispered, "Serving the emperor is truly like sleeping next to a starving tiger." The old sayings were never wrong. The sudden death of Wang Guanjiang shattered Hu Weiyong's last bit of hope. He was completely terrified. He knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the executioner's blade was coming for his own neck next. He stopped hesitating. He called his men together and finalized the bloody plot to overthrow the Ming Dynasty. He ordered Mao Xing to secretly mobilize the Imperial Guards. He told Lu Zhonging and Chen Ning to gather their hidden troops and loyalists across the provinces. They set the date for the strike on the 15th day of the first lunar month, the night of the Lantern Festival, when the entire city would be distracted by fireworks and celebrations. But he never imagined that his grand master plan was already sitting neatly on Zhu Yuanzhang's desk. The spies hidden in his shadows had reported every single movement, every single whisper. Zhu Yuanzhang had not struck yet, simply because he was waiting. He was waiting for the exact moment the treason became undeniable, so he could cast a massive net and wipe out the entire corrupt network in one bloody sweep. The final straw that broke Hu Weiyong's back came from his most trusted, loyal ally Tu Ji. Tu Ji was a high-ranking censor who had followed Hu for years, doing all his dirty work, framing innocent men, and destroying honest officials. But Tu Ji was a rat who knew exactly when a ship was sinking. He saw Wang Guanjiang die. He saw Hu Weiyong panicking and making mistakes. He knew this rebellion was an absolute suicide mission against a military genius like Zhu Yuanzhang. To save his own skin, he decided to sell his master out. In the first month of the 13th year of Hongwu, Tu Ji sneaked into the imperial palace under the cover of darkness. He knelt before Zhu Yuanzhang and spilled everything. He told the emperor exactly how Hu bribed the officials, where he hid the forged weapons, how he contacted the northern nomads, and the exact date and time of the Lantern Festival strike. He laid out the entire conspiracy, piece by piece, naming every name. Zhu Yuanzhang had been waiting for this exact night. He immediately unleashed his most terrifying weapon, the Jin Yue, the elite imperial assassins in their embroidered uniforms. He ordered them to surround the chancellor's massive mansion and capture every living soul inside. At that very moment, Hu Weiyong was sitting in his secret room, going over the final battle plans with his commanders. Suddenly, the roaring sound of heavy boots, war horses, and screaming voices shattered the night. He knew it was over. He screamed at his hidden outlaws to fight back, to buy him time to escape. But these street thugs and criminals were absolute garbage compared to the trained, ruthless killers of the Jin Yue. The outlaws were slaughtered in minutes, their blood soaking the courtyard. Hu Weiyong tried to slip out through a hidden back door in the garden, but he ran straight into a wall of imperial guards. He was thrown to the dirt, bound in heavy iron chains, and dragged away in disgrace. Zhu Yuanzhang ordered the interrogators to use the most extreme, brutal torture on Hu Weiyong. At first, Hu tried to deny everything, clinging to his pride. But against the horrific tools of the imperial dungeon, his spirit broke rapidly, and he confessed to every single charge, weeping like a child. Armed with his bloody confession, Zhu Yuanzhang unleashed a storm across the empire. He ordered the immediate arrest of every official tied to the plot. This was the beginning of a massive, earth-shattering purge. The interrogations in the dungeons were a living nightmare. The Jin Yue had a quota of names to fill, and to get those names, they subjected the arrested officials to unimaginable agony. They burned their flesh with red-hot branding irons. They crushed their legs in heavy wooden presses. They hammered sharp bamboo splinters deep under their fingernails. If a man refused to name an accomplice, they would torture him endlessly until his heart simply gave out. Unable to bear the blinding pain, Many officials just started screaming random names. They named people they barely knew, people they had met once at a crowded banquet, or even people they personally hated, just to make the torture stop for a few seconds. A man named Wang Pu, who had absolutely nothing to do with Hu Weiyong's treason, was dragged into the dungeons. His only crime was that he had previously refused to accept Hu's dirty bribes. The Jinyue beat him brutally, demanding he admit he was part of the rebel army. But Wang Pu was a man of iron will and fierce honor. Bleeding from head to toe, he screamed out, "I am an official of the great Ming Dynasty. How could I ever frame an innocent soul? Hu Weiyong's treason has nothing to do with me. If you want to kill me, then cut me to pieces, but I will never lie." Furious at his defiance, the guards dragged him straight to the execution block and chopped off his head. Another official, Yi Boju, had once written a brave, honest letter to the emperor, begging him to stop killing the founding generals. For that crime of honesty, Zhu Yuanzhang had locked him in a dark prison. When the Hu Weiyong case exploded, the guards wanted to claim extra credit, so they added Yi Boju's name to the treason list. They tortured him so severely in his cell that he died a miserable, agonizing death in the dark. This terrifying witch hunt started in the 13th year of Hongwu, and dragged on endlessly, all the way until the 23rd year. It lasted for 10 agonizing years. The people dragged to the execution grounds ranged from high-ranking dukes and marquises, all the way down to local county magistrates and minor clerks. Over 15,000 people lost their lives to the executioner's blade. The Marquis of Jian Lu Zongheng, the Marquis of Yan Tang Shengzong, the Marquis of Pingliang, Fei Ju, the Marquis of Nangsong Zhou Yong, the Marquis of Xinjiang Zheng Yuchun, the Marquis of Henan, Lu Ju, the Marquis of Jingning, Yi Sheng, the Duke of Shen, Deng Zhen, and the Imperial Guard commander, Mao Xiang. All of them, and so many more, were dragged to the chopping block and slaughtered like animals. And the bloodshed did not stop there. Even the great Duke Li Shanchang, who had been retired and quiet for years, could not escape the emperor's long memory. In the 23rd year of Hongwu, a massive storm broke over his head. The emperor declared that Li Shanchang knew about the rebellion, but failed to report it, making him a silent traitor to the crown. Zhu Yuanzhang had been wanting to kill the old duke for years, to truly crush the last remnants of the Huixi faction. But he never had the perfect excuse. Now he finally had his blade at Li's throat. When the Imperial Guards surrounded his home, Li Shanchang desperately pulled out the 2 iron plaques of immunity, given to him by the emperor himself. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his wrinkled face, crying out, "Your Majesty, I followed you through fire and blood. I risked my life to build this empire. You gave me these plaques to spare my life. Why are you slaughtering my entire family?" But Zhu Yuanzhang did not even blink. He looked down from his throne and said with bone-chilling coldness, "I gave you that iron plaque. If I want it to work, it works. If I want it to be useless, it is useless." And just like that, the greatest founding father of the Ming Dynasty, along with his entire extended family, was executed in the public square. As for Tu Ji, the man who betrayed Hu Weiyong to save himself, his ending was just as horrific. Zhu Yuanzhang despised traitors from the bottom of his heart. He felt that a man who could turn on his master so easily was a man with no loyalty and no honor. Even though Tu Ji had exposed the plot, the emperor had no intention of letting a poisonous snake live in his court. In the end, Zhu Yuanzhang ordered Tu Ji to be dragged to the execution ground right alongside Hu Weiyong. They were both sentenced to the ultimate punishment, lingqi, the slow death by 1,000 cuts. As the executioner's knife sliced into his flesh, Tu Ji finally realized that selling his soul for wealth and safety had only bought him a terrible ticket to hell. On the surface, the Hu Weiyong case was about a corrupt chancellor trying to steal the throne. But if you peel back the bloody layers, you see the brilliant, terrifying mind of Zhu Yuanzhang. He used this massive case not just to kill Hu and his followers, and not just to wipe out the powerful Huixi military faction. His ultimate goal, the real reason he let the blood flow like a river for 10 years, was to completely destroy the chancellor system. Exactly 1 month after Hu Weiyong was executed, Zhu Yuanzhang issued a historic imperial decree. He declared, "The position of chancellor is abolished forever, the secretariat is dismantled, the 6 ministries will report directly to the throne, and the grand secretaries will only serve as advisors. They will have no power to make decisions. The ultimate authority of the empire will rest solely in the hands of the emperor." This single piece of paper violently ended a political system that had run China for over 1,500 years. Many people looking back cannot understand why Zhu Yuanzhang was so obsessed with destroying the chancellorship. The answer lies deep in his own traumatic past. He grew up starving, watching corrupt officials crush the poor. He had a natural burning hatred and distrust for bureaucrats. When he put on the dragon robes, he realized that a chancellor with too much power could easily turn the emperor into a helpless puppet. To him, the Chancellor system was the root cause of lost imperial power.
He believed that only by holding every single thread of power in his own hands could he guarantee that the Ming Dynasty would last forever.
But what Zhu Yuanzhang failed to understand was that the Chancellor system existed for over a millennium for a very good reason. Let us break it down simply. A dynasty is like a massive corporation. The emperor is the chairman of the board, and the chancellor is the chief executive officer. The chairman sets the grand vision, the long-term goals. The CEO handles the daily grind, managing the thousands of employees, and solving the endless problems. If you fire the CEO, the chairman, no matter how brilliant, cannot possibly do the work of 10,000 men. Just look at the Ming Dynasty. The empire had over a dozen massive provinces, hundreds of prefectures, and thousands of counties. Every single day, a mountain of issues erupted. From a fistfight between two farmers in a dusty village, to massive floods wiping out crops, to border skirmishes with nomad cavalry, every single one of these problems required a decision. Without a chancellor to filter and solve them, every piece of paper went straight to the emperor's desk. Even if the emperor had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would drown in the ink. The greatest emperors in history knew they needed a CEO. Look at Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty, Lai Shimin. He was a genius, but he relied heavily on his chancellors, Fang Xuanling and Du Ruhui. Fang was brilliant at planning, Du was decisive in action. Together they helped Lai Shimin create a golden age. Without them, Lai Shimin's brilliance would have been buried under paperwork. But Zhu Yuanzhang refused to believe this. He thought he was made of iron. He believed his endless energy was enough to run the world alone. He quickly found out how wrong he was. After abolishing the chancellor, the crushing weight of the entire empire slammed onto his shoulders. He woke up long before the sun rose, staring at mountains of reports. He worked straight through the day, deep into the freezing night. Sometimes he was so buried in documents, he did not even have time to chew his food. Historian Wu Han once calculated the sheer madness of Zhu's workload. Between the 14th and the 21st of September, in the 17th year of Hongwu, a span of just 8 days, Zhu Yuanzhang had to personally read 1,666 official documents, dealing with 3,391 separate issues. These issues ranged from moving armies and firing generals, to settling local land disputes and fixing irrigation ditches. Even if he never slept, never ate, and never rested, he had to process over 200 documents, and make over 400 critical decisions every single day. This insane, bone-crushing workload made the emperor incredibly short-tempered. Once the Minister of Revenue, Ru Taisu, submitted a memorial to the throne. It was a staggering 17,000 words long. Zhu Yuanzhang ordered a eunuch to read it out loud. The eunuch read for over 3 hours, and still had not reached the actual point of the letter. Zhu Yuanzhang's face turned red with rage. He grabbed the document, slammed it onto the floor, and ordered his guards to drag Ru Taisu outside, and beat him with heavy wooden planks 50 times. The next day, his anger cooled, and he ordered the eunuch to keep reading. It was not until the 16,500th word that Ru Taisu finally stated his purpose. He actually had 5 very good suggestions for the empire. The rest of the document was just flowery, useless poetry praising the emperor. Zhu Yuanzhang sighed heavily and said his ideas are actually quite good, but he is just too damn wordy. From now on, anyone who writes to me must get straight to the point. No more garbage words. To speed things up, Zhu created strict rules, demanding that no report could exceed 1,000 words, or the writer would be severely punished. But even with these rules, his life was a never-ending cycle of ink and paper. For 31 years on the throne, he barely took a single day off. He was, without a doubt, one of the most hardworking emperors in human history. But all of Zhu Yuanzhang's blood, sweat, and paranoia did not give him the future he dreamed of. He destroyed the chancellor, thinking he had secured absolute power. He did not realize that power is a double-edged sword. When power is too concentrated, it not only crushes the emperor physically, but it throws the entire court out of balance. Without a chancellor to guide them, the officials lost their center of gravity. They started forming secret factions, backstabbing each other in the shadows. And worse, if an emperor ever took the throne who was weak, lazy, or just not as tough as Zhu Yuanzhang, a massive power vacuum would instantly open up, allowing new monsters to rise. When Zhu Yuanzhang died, his young grandson Xu Yunwen took the throne. He did not have his grandfather's iron will, or his endless stamina. He was completely overwhelmed by the crushing weight of the absolute power he inherited. Soon after, his uncle Zhu Di launched a bloody civil war and stole the crown. Zhu Di was a warrior, and he quickly realized that running the empire without a chancellor was impossible. But he did not dare break his father's sacred law. So, he found a loophole. He created the Grand Secretariat, the Nage. He brought in brilliant scholars to help him sort the paperwork. In name, these grand secretaries were just humble advisors with no real authority. But in reality, they slowly absorbed the power of the old chancellors. They filtered the reports, drafted the emperor's responses, and even had the power to reject imperial decrees. By the middle and late stages of the Ming Dynasty, the Grand Secretariat became an unstoppable force. Men like Yan Song and Zhang Zhezing rose to power. They were grand secretaries, but they wielded more absolute, terrifying control over the empire than any official chancellor in Chinese history. Zhu Yuanzhang drowned the capital in blood to destroy the chancellor, only to accidentally create a system where his descendants were ruled by men with even greater power. That is the dark, beautiful irony of history. The iron laws of history cannot be broken by one man's sword. Zhu Yuanzhang tried to shatter a 1,000-year balance of power, and in the end, the dialectic of history swallowed his plans whole. The smoke from the Hu Weiyong case has long faded away. 15,000 lives bought the death of a title. When Zhu Yuanzhang looked at the empty halls of the Secretariat, he probably smiled, thinking he had conquered the universe. But he did not know that by destroying the Chancellor, he cursed himself to be the most exhausted man alive. He tried to hoard all the power, never imagining his own flesh and blood would buckle under its weight. He tried to lock down the Ming Dynasty forever, only to guarantee that his future grandsons would surrender their power to the Grand Secretaries. The tighter you squeeze the sand, the faster it slips through your fingers. The night has grown deep. The glowing lanterns of Nanjing City are slowly fading into the dark. The vivid faces of the past, the wild arrogance of Hu Weiyong, the cowardly betrayal of Tu Ji, and the terrifying paranoia of Zhu Yuanzhang have all crumbled into the dust of time. But that 10-year storm of blood, that epic saga of power, balance, and human nature, will flow forever in the great river of history. Next time, we will dive into what happened after the dust settled. How did the surviving officials navigate the terrifying new world Zhu Yuanzhang created? And how did they play the deadly game of survival? Thank you for listening to Sleep History. Rest well, my friends, and good night.